Drummond Island Dogman, chapters 15 through 17. Chapter 15. I heard the snap of a twig just after I'd closed and latched the shed door. It caused me to stop, to freeze in my tracks motionless. The flashlight beam was trained on the trees a few feet away. I waited, listened. Nothing. Not a single sound. That in itself seemed strange. In the summer, the night is filled with various noises, such as the chirping of crickets and the rhythmic croaking and peeping of frogs. Dad and I live outside of the village, so there aren't any cars going by, and rarely do we hear a plane, especially at night. But now it was October. All of the insects were gone, the frogs and toads in hibernation for the long winter that would soon be upon us. Yet the complete and absolute silence I was experiencing was discomforting. It was as though all of the night creatures had been frightened into hiding, as if they'd scurried back to their homes and dens to escape some unseen force or unknown predator. I continued listening. I was certain I'd heard something nearby, a snapping of a branch or the crunching of a dry, brittle leaf. My imagination went into overdrive like it had done at the pond when Delaney and I had discovered the large tracks in the soft earth. I had been filled with a feeling of overwhelming dread, a feeling of increasing dire. My instincts had warned me that something was very, very wrong, that it was time to flee, to get away from the area as quickly as possible. That same feeling came over me as I stood frozen in the darkness. Although the night air was cool, my skin felt hot and clammy. A thin sheen of sweat had formed despite the chilly temperature. The silence roared. Not another sound was heard. I slowly shifted the flashlight beam to the left and then to the right. Up, down, around. Nothing. Not a single sound. I remembered the glowing eyes of the owl as the bird had flown directly at my face. I'd surprised him, and no doubt he was just as afraid of me as I was of him. But now this was something else. There was something in the darkness, something unseen that had eyes just as penetrating as the owl's. I was certain of it. I could feel the eyes in the night. I could sense them in the darkness watching me. The same eyes that had been watching Delaney and me from the shadows near the pond. Watching, waiting for just the right moment. I wasn't going to give it a chance, whatever it was. I took off running, taking giant steps across the lawn, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Shadows leaped and flew in every direction, into the garage, past Dad's sleeping truck. I left the garage door cracked open, and I slowed just enough so that I wouldn't crash into it and wake Dad. I quietly closed and locked the door behind me. Safety. The relief of being in my own home, safe and secure, felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The panic I'd felt moments before began to dissipate and fade. My breathing returned to normal. Home. Inside. I tiptoed across the carpet, and the only sound was the soft shushing of my slippers. After getting a glass of water from the kitchen, I returned to my room, stepped out of my slippers, pulled off my sweatshirt, and climbed into bed. I closed the window, but not before giving one more glance outside, into the darkness, into the shadows and mystery and fright I'd just left behind. Nothing but an ink-black wall and its cryptic secrets. I fell asleep in the safety and comfort of my bed, glad to be indoors, glad I'd been able to get to Hops just in time before the great horned owl had made a meal out of him, glad that whatever was in the woods beyond the shed, if it was anything at all, was out there, outside, and I was inside. Just my imagination, I thought, as I drifted off to sleep. That's all it was, my imagination. Unfortunately, the beast stalking the woods of Drummond Island had nothing to do with my imagination. Dogman, the horrifying creature that was supposed to be only a legend, was about to walk straight out of my nightmares and into reality. Chapter 16. He had waited. He had watched. He had considered making his move, bursting from the shadows, snaring the small human in his enormous claws. No, his instinct spoke to him, and he listened. He was hungry, but caution spoke louder than his need for food. Had the small human spotted him? No, he watched the boy as he stood motionless, holding the light device, moving it around. The beast could sense the small human's fear, carried it in the gentle night wind. He could taste it. At that moment, he could have easily overtaken the boy. It would have taken mere seconds. Still, no, the time wasn't right. He would wait for a better time, a better opportunity. But when the boy began running, leaping across the lawn in giant leaps and bounds, the beam of light careening wildly, the creature found himself following. His hulking figure emerged from the forest just as the boy vanished into the shadows of the garage. He heard a door slam. Continuing on along the front of the house, he sniffed the air, following the human scent as it drifted through an open window. Dogman was only a few feet from the screen. He could hear shuffling inside. His night vision was much better than a human's. He saw the boy's face through the screen, and he knew that he himself, although only a few feet from the house, could not be spotted. The window slid closed behind the screen, and the curtain covered it. Dogman waited for a moment, and then sniffed the air again. There it was again, the smell of a small animal. He turned slowly, sniffed the air. Quietly, he stalked toward the shed. Chapter 17. The shed door was open. I stopped in the driveway, carrying my backpack over one shoulder. Dad had already headed off to work, and I was on my way to school. And the shed door was wide open. Didn't I close it last night, I wondered? Yes, I did, I'm sure of it. It was closed when I got scared and ran back into the house. But Dad probably needed something before he left for work. I turned and strode to the shed. With every step I took, a knot of trepidation twisted my stomach. Something was wrong. I was sure of it. I could feel it. The shed door had scratches on the outside. Several deep gashes, claw marks, were dug into the wood near the handle. It was as though something had struggled to get the door open, pawing at the handle until it succeeded. Inside the shed, nothing looked amiss. Hops was in his cage looking at me, his jaws moving back and forth, his whiskers twitching. "Good morning, Fuzzy Buddy," I said to the rabbit. I checked to make sure he had enough food and water, and then I returned to the door to inspect the gashes again. Common sense told me it was the work of a bear. My imagination, something that I should never listen to but often did, told me something else. I looked at the ground, searching for tracks. Here by the shed, the grass grew tight and trim, so there weren't any clear imprints of anything. In several spots, the grass appeared to be pressed down, but I could have done that with my shoes. "Be good," I told my rabbit in the cage. "I'll see you after school." I closed the shed door. The morning was cool and crisp, and I pulled my coat collar around my neck to keep warm on my walk. We have a long 2-track driveway that leads out to Town Line Road, and although I had a math test that day, it was the farthest thing from my mind as I hiked up the winding driveway. No, I was thinking of other things. Strange things. Weird things. I was thinking about bizarre tracks, bigger than my feet, that we discovered at the pond the day before. I was thinking about the strange feeling that Delaney and I were being watched from the shadows of the forest. I thought about how silent it had been overnight when I went to check on Hops, how the stillness seemed to be alive with a dark, foreboding, unseen presence. I was thinking, in short, about Dogman. I know he's not real, I told myself. The whole thing is just made up. All the stories, all the fables and legends, it's all just make-believe. Or was it? I think nobody really knew for sure. After all, stories, no matter how crazy or far-fetched, usually begin with a seed of truth, a nugget of something that is real. However, as the story gets passed along and retold, it tends to change, buoyed by the imagination of each person who's doing the telling. Regardless of whether or not the stories of Dogman were true, I found myself walking at a faster pace than normal as I made my way up our long driveway. I would be alone until I reached the open expanse of Town Line Road, where I would most likely see a few friends on the way to school. And I would, of course, meet up with Delaney, and we would walk the rest of the way to school together. But now, the trees around me were filled with candy-colored leaves of copper, amber, crimson, and gold, all sugar-coated with glittering, frozen morning dew. The branches and limbs knitted together to create a tunnel of shadow magic as I walked, frosty leaves crunching beneath my feet. The sound reminded me of bones being gnawed by powerful jaws and long, sharp teeth. Crunch went the leaves under my shoes. Crunch. Crunch. Was I being watched? Crunch. Was there someone, something watching me at that very moment, hiding behind the colorful leaves and woven branches? Crunch. I walked faster. Crunch. Crunch. Finally, I made it to Town Line Road. A few minutes later, Delaney and I were walking together to school. I felt safe for the time being.